Welcome to the Matt Waller Podcast, where we look at success at the intersection of technology, logistics, supply chain, retail, and CPG, also known as the retail value chain. I want to clarify that this podcast is distinct from my responsibilities as a professor in the Sam M. Walton College of Business. Nonetheless, it aligns with my aspiration to provide practical insights to professionals and business by showcasing companies and people that can enhance your ability to manage, lead, and strategize and market effectively in the retail value chain. Before we dive into today's exciting episode, I'd like to thank our sponsor, New Road Capital Partners. New Road invests in proven technologies, services, and products that serve unmet needs in the marketplace. They look for companies in supply chain and logistics, as well as consumer-oriented companies. For more information, go to newroadcp.com. I would also like to disclose that I am a strategic advisor to New Road. I'd also like to recognize podcastvideos.com for the services they provide for these podcasts. I'm very pleased with their services. And now, without further ado, let's get into the exciting episode. I have with me today Clayton Woodruff and Mike Burton, two co-founders of LockStop, which solves an amazing problem. Wouldn't it be great if you could ride your bike and not have to carry a lock with you? If the lock were just available on the bike rack. And imagine from a city's perspective or a park's perspective that it doesn't take a lot of expensive infrastructure changes to do that. Well, you're going to hear a really innovative idea today that, it's amazing to me. They just came up with this idea a couple of years ago. They've already got a prototype, and they're getting ready to roll it out. And they've got IP protection on it as well. It's really interesting. When you hear about some of these ideas, you always think, why didn't someone already think of this? I mean, this has been needed for decades. But again, this concept of, riding your bike and not having to worry about having to even have a lock with you. I would love that personally. And they came up with the idea and the prototype on how to do that. You're going to get to hear that today. So if you are a biker, a city official, someone with parks and rec or a university, I think you'll be interested in listening to this today. If you're an investor, I think you'll be interested in this. If you're interested in how to make your community healthier, I think you'll be interested in this. So if you're an entrepreneur, I think you should listen to this as well, because you'll learn about how they have developed this and what they've done. Clayton and Mike met in the Executive MBA program in the Sam M. Walton College of Business. And they took a class called New Venture Development, where they had the opportunity to create a new company, a new product, new service. And this is what they created. But so Mike had lots of experience in the U.S. Marine Corps, over a decade of experience. He also had experience at Walmart as a merchant and at Sam's Club. And he got lots of experience in product management, which is very helpful for an entrepreneur. But again, a couple of years ago, they met in the MBA program, and Mike had an idea based on some experiences he had, and Clayton and him really just ran with the ball. Clayton Woodruff, who was also in the Executive MBA program where they met, had an incredible experience, especially in trail design. He worked for a company called Progressive Trail Design. He was vice president of operations and customer experience, and had been involved in account management and project management. But you can imagine having that experience would be really relevant to this kind of a product. And on top of that, he's had other experiences with apparel companies and technology companies. And so, both of them together have different experiences, but very complementary to what they're trying to accomplish. I think you're really going to enjoy this. Well, Clayton and Mike, thank you so much for taking time to visit with me today.
Yeah, we appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Well, I'm really interested in what inspired you to create a public bike locking network, and how did your personal experiences shape this idea?
You know, Matt, it's funny. Clayton and I were just talking about it, and I think I've effectively, subconsciously been developing this idea for the past 31 years. So anyone that's seen me pitch knows that I had my first bike stolen when I was 6 years old. This sweet little candy apple red, 20-inch Huffy chrome pegs. I had it effectively for maybe 12 hours, locked it up to the water meter with this cable lock at night. Next morning, I came back, and the bike was gone.
Where were you living?
So I grew up in Maysville, Kentucky. My family, so I grew up in this small 2-bedroom apartment with my mom, my grandmother, and 3 of my cousins. So, we didn't get a lot of new stuff, so that bike really meant a lot to me. And so fast forward, 25 years, walking through Bentonville's farmer's market with my family. We get to the farmer's market. We realized really quickly we had forgotten our bike locks, and moving to Bentonville from California, you obviously bring a lot with you from California. There we lock up everything. I joke that we even lock up, our dogs. And so we got there. My wife, had forgotten the bike locks. And so I stood there the whole time while my wife and my kids are kind of walking around the market and standing there. I'm just thinking, why is it 2021 and I'm still carrying this heavy bike lock around? Why isn't there some way I could just lock my bike? I'll pay for it. I just want to pull my bike up, lock it, walk away. And so that's really where the idea started.
That's great. So can you tell me a little bit about how the system works and what makes it different from traditional bike locks?
Yeah, so a big problem in the industry is that, either nobody carries a bike lock or they carry one that's just like a little cable lock. And we actually had a fun little challenge last year at the Heartland Challenge where we did a competition to see who could steal a bike the fastest. And we actually took a cable lock, like a really thick cable lock, locked it up to a bike. We actually had the Secretary of Commerce was there, Secretary McDonald. And the fastest time to take a pair of bolt cutters and clip it and run was 7 seconds.
Are you kidding?
No. The slowest time was actually 45 seconds, which is probably even more staggering. Needless to say, most people don't carry locks that are very stable or solid. So, we kind of joke as well that we've created the lightest and most convenient bike lock in the world. Now, reality is that thing weighs about 25 pounds, but it actually
stays. Could you show everybody?
Yeah. So the whole point of it is that it actually stays on the bike rack. So you're not having to carry this around.
So that's why this is a public approach.
Exactly. And it retrofits to existing bike infrastructure. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel and try to do a lot of construction. We're just saying, hey, bike racks are there. They're everywhere, actually. And almost all cities have a mandate to where if you make a business or anything, you have to have bike parking. So we can turn almost anything into a bike lock at this point.
So tell me about this piece of equipment.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's pretty simple. Honestly, you're able to just walk up, it turns on, QR code, kind of similar to how you would do micromobility rideshare. You just scan it, activates the lock, just lock it up, and then you're on your way. So it's all fully app enabled. There's no keyholes. There's really no way to break into it, aside from a pair of pliers and a blowtorch kind of thing. But we also have notification systems we built into it. And this is the other beauty of it beyond just your personal bike lock, because it's at an actual bike rack and it's, battery powered or direct powered. It allows us to build in, basically a tripwire system. So if somebody tried to grind through it or anything, it would set off an alarm at the rack and send you a notification.
Wow.
And so you don't get that level of security with the personal bike lock.
So now that you're right, that's a big difference. But would cutting through this thing here, would that be harder than just a cable?
Absolutely. So this is tempered steel. So if you have enough time, you're going to be able to get through it, right? You can grind through just about anything if you have enough time.
Sure.
But the problem is that most people just carry little cable locks, which you can clip with, hardly anything. It doesn't take much. You cannot clip these with cable locks or with bolt cutters at all. So the only way you could effectively get through this is with a grinder. And that's where having a notification system built into it And then we're even exploring actually being able to directly connect with police departments. So it would immediately send the police department a notification. So just like, your security system at home, it sends a notification if anybody tries to, open the door or break in any way. We'll have the same sort of security.
Well, these, just taking a lock, you were talking about forgetting to bring your locks with your family. It's a hassle. I don't like carrying around a lock, personally. And I do forget them. Now, we're lucky because we live in Bentonville where it's pretty safe. I've got a Allied gravel bike, Able, which is fairly expensive. And
Absolutely.
It's not the most expensive, but it's expensive, and I actually don't lock it. If this were available, I certainly would do it. But I don't want to carry around lock. Now, in some cities, I take it to, I will, absolutely. But Northwest Arkansas, especially Bentonville and Rogers, are super safe. But so tell me, how do you see LockStop contributing to the creation of a healthier, city in general?
Yeah, one interesting statistic that's out there right now is 40% of the trips that we take are within 2 miles of their destination. So imagine if we were to replace one of those trips each week. So effectively taking 52 bike trips a week or bike trips a year, that's effectively like planting a tree and allowing it to grow for 10 years. That's the carbon offset there. Now you take into consideration, you have over 50 million riders in the United States alone. Like, think about how large that forest is. And so more people on bikes, less people in cars, less congestion, less carbon, and happier people, healthier people. It's been proven out there, the more that you ride your bike, well, the stronger your cardiovascular system is. It decreases the risk of heart disease. Mental health is another big proponent here. People that are riding their bike, it's been proven that they're happier, they're healthier, they release more endorphins in their bloodstream. So realistically, we're offsetting the carbon, but we're putting happier people back out into the community.
I've noticed when I ride my bike home after work, and I maybe, who knows where I am at the time, and I've changed. We lived in Fayetteville for 28 years and moved up to Rogers 2 years ago. But it might take me, let's say, 45 minutes to ride home, depending on where I was coming from. And sometimes it would be in pretty hot weather, sometimes cold weather, sometimes it was great. But in any case, I noticed that, and I have 4 kids, and they're all out now, but back when they were at home, I noticed that after riding my bike home after work, I was more present with them. In other words, it was like a break. Because one problem I always have is coming home and I'm thinking about, I should have said this, I should have done this, I didn't get enough done. That's kind of stuff that's always going through my mind. And but when I would ride my bike, and it was nice because on the Greenway, I was mainly riding on the Razorback Greenway. You've got trees and grass and fields and streams, and it's just so refreshing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was a Marine for a long time. So 12 years I was in the Marine Corps. And one of the things I would do before I come home is I would take my boots off at the door. And so that allowed me the opportunity to kind of leave my day behind. And that's effectively the way that we see bike riding. It's the way to leave your boots at the door. You've had a long day. Maybe it's stressful. It's giving you the opportunity to unlace your boots, take them off on the way home. So by the time you're meeting with your family or friends, they're getting the best version of, Matt Waller, Mike Burton, and Clayton Woodruff. So just gives you that opportunity. And that's what we want to extend to everyone, by kind of lowering this barrier of entry for riding.
Well, I love this idea of, you've taken a problem and turned it upside down, right? Because now with your approach, you don't have to take your lock with you. To me, from a user perspective, that's huge. Right. I would, if I knew a certain city or location had an ability to do this, I would be more inclined to do things there on my bike than if I had to take my lock with me. Which it's interesting because this kind of is a way a city could get a competitive advantage in terms of outdoor activity. But when I look at your solution, okay, conceptually I like this, right? You don't have to take your lock with you. That's cool. Okay. Now I'm looking at this. It looks complicated. So I'm curious, could you talk a little bit about the challenges you faced in developing the prototype?
Yes, there has been many challenges. This thing started, Mike actually found a photo the other day and sent it to me of multiple versions of our prototypes, which literally started off with an electrical box from Home Depot that he built with his 8-year-old son overnight during like a mentorship weekend at New Venture Development, the U of A. So that was the prototype number one. And then we went to a 3D printed prototype that was clear that we literally painted in a bathroom at a hotel at a pitch competition in Canada the day we pitched. And if I know you know Sarah Goforth, yes. She was fun story there. She was kind of encouraging us not to do it for the pitch, not to use it, because we were literally building it that day. And she's like, if it goes wrong, if it doesn't work, then we're like, we're doing it. We were determined to do it.
Wow.
We did it, and it
did it work?
Absolutely. It did. Do not look inside of it. There was a bunch of stuff shoved in there. We had, for our notification system on the alarm, we literally had a little like mobile alarm thing, and he had it behind his back. So when we showcased it,
the Wizard of Oz.
He hits the alarm, it goes off. Sarah's mouth goes to the floor. But it was just, we ended up getting, I think we ended up winning that competition. So anyways, and then we had another 3D printed version, but honestly, the beauty of it for us is that we got connected with the U of A, and they were just starting out Beta Bentonville, which is the prototype lab up here in Bentonville. And we were number one on the list. So we worked heavily with them over the last year, and it's been just completely integral to us actually going from, an electric box to what you see here. And while it does look complicated, and internally, there are some complicated factors to it. The fact is that we actually designed it relatively simple. Everything in here is out of the box, so there's not a lot of very customized, complicated things.
That keeps the cost down.
Keeps the cost down. If anything breaks, it's easy to order. I can't take the back plate off, but if we took the back plate off, you'd be able to see what we call our Nintendo cassette, because the whole internals of this thing is literally in this cassette that you can just slide in and slide out. So if we have to do any repairs, you don't have to take it apart and unhook all these little things. You just slide this cassette out, blow on it like the Nintendo and then slide it back in. And then in terms of just usage, I have a 19-year-old son. I had him use it, unsolicited, just like, hey, go use the app, do it. And he was like, oh yeah, that's pretty simple. I think my mom used it the other day. So it's very similar if you've done any of the scooter shares. The app layout, UI is very similar. So it's something that people are used to. That was obviously very intentional. It's like, and we have our little scan, lock, live. It's a 3-step process. So while it looks complicated, it's actually relatively simple.
So could you speak to a little bit about how the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Northwest Arkansas has supported your journey?
Oh, gosh, yeah. I can't imagine having a greater startup journey. The University of Arkansas, Sam Walton, College of Business, that's where Clayton and I met. So, without being there, none of this would have been possible. Clayton and I worked, together over the last couple of years. So without one of us, the idea wouldn't have come to fruition. And so starting in New Venture Development, that's really where we got some steam there.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, New Venture Development, working with Sarah Goforth, David Hinton down there, I think their confidence in our vision is really what gave us confidence in our own vision. We went into this realistically as grad students thinking, hey, we need to have a business in order.
Because you were both in the MBA program.
We were, yes. Exactly.
And you took this New Venture Development as a course. And we
were just trying to get an A, really.
Yeah. That's how it started off. It's like, okay, we need to have a business so that we can go through New Venture Development. He and I both, did our graduate courses down there, and then we added on their certificate of entrepreneurship, which, allowed us to participate in the New Venture Development partnering up with, the team down there at the Office of Entrepreneurship. And so, working with us all the way from understanding how to develop the business plan, understanding, who our customer base would be, what our go-to-market strategies would be. And so we spent, a lot of time on the front end really doing the research in order to develop this really solid foundation. And, then we had the opportunity to circulate this idea on the pitch circuit. So we were accepted into some pitch competitions, the first of which was at Ivy Business College in Ontario, Canada. And so we take this idea that we had developed, we had written a business plan behind it. Well, now we have the opportunity to share our vision with people outside of just new venture development, not just outside of new venture development, but outside of the country. And so we go to Ivy Business School, we pitch the competition there, and then we end up winning the entire competition. And I think that's really when Clayton and I kind of looked at one another and thought, okay, this may be real. And so he and I really started investing a lot of our time there. And so we continued to iterate on what our plan would be, again, prototyping different devices there. And then we got accepted into another business competition in Manitoba, Canada for the Stu Clark New Venture Development, I think is what it's called. And so we went there, and again, we were really successful in the elevator pitch, and we received a lot of positive feedback from the judges. So then we just continued to develop this idea and refine it, and we put it in front of as many people as we possibly could. And, you're going to these pitch competitions, so you have this really robust network of judges and mentors that are providing you, all of the feedback that they possibly can. They're punching holes in your story, your business plan, your go-to-market strategy. So each one of those holes that we identified, we just kind of filled with data and then, went back to the drawing board. How do we make this better and better and better? And then we came back and we competed in the Heartland Challenge. And, we had a great experience there, especially in the startup studio, or was it the startup? I can't recall what it was, but it was a startup competition there that's where we did the bike theft competition. And, then we circulated the idea there and we just continued to develop it. We had the opportunity to pitch at the Governor's Cup and received a lot of feedback. And then we put it in front of thousands of bike riders at Bike Fest, here in Bentonville. Again, that entrepreneurial network where we have, Kenny Belay with Bike Fest bringing this great experience to Bentonville, thousands of riders from all over the country, and they had the opportunity to lay eyes on it. So what we did is we listened. We listened to what our mentors were saying. We listened to what the professionals were saying. And most importantly, we listened to what the riders were saying. And we took back each one of those little bits of information and continued to develop the product that's going to give that experience, that they really need and what they want.
How many competitions have you competed in?
5. I think our last competition was in Bangkok, Thailand.
You're kidding.
Yeah, so we competed at the Sasson School of Business.
Did you physically go?
We physically went.
We went. We flew 35 hours.
It was quite a trip. Yeah, it was terrible. It was a terrible trip there, I'll say.
Yes.
No one wants to spend that much time on a plane, but again, Clayton and I spent all that time on the plane working through our pitch and trying to figure out additional ways to make this, a value add to anyone that's going to use it.
You're talking about, listening to people, and you've been doing that a lot for, 2 years now?
Yeah, 2 years.
You have personal experiences and biases, but how valuable has it been really listening to all these different people?
Yeah, I mean, I came from the bike world, so I've actually worked in the bike industry for over 8 years. And so for me, when we met and we started talking about this, I was like, wow, okay, I could see this. I've been, I've ridden my bike all over the world, and I've just seen the same exact problem over and over again. And you kind of mentioned Bentonville, where we're fortunate here. So actually, when we first met, I was like, I'm not sure people are going to care around here. Because you go outside of, like the Hub Bike Lounge, you'll see $100,000 in bikes, not locked. But we started setting up
$100,000 bikes?
$100,000 in bikes.
Oh, right.
Well, you're out. That's probably $9,000. Right. You have 10, 20 of those.
Yeah.
No, not $100,000. I'll wait to see what that one looks like. But anyway, so we, obviously started talking to people. Customer discovery is probably the key part of any new venture. And that's one of the things that was, drilled into us through GORB as well as new venture development. And honestly, even in Bentonville, we found that even all those people that don't lock their bikes, they're worried about it. And they're,
of course,
and they're not, locking their bikes, running inside, hanging out forever without going out and checking on it. And we had a good idea as like a marketing ploy. It was like, you know what you should do is you should give somebody $3,000 and have them go set it outside and then go inside for an hour and see if they're comfortable, which is essentially the same thing. And 3,000 is even low for some of those bikes. So really back to the main point here is that, you know, we just listened to what people had to say, you know, what their threshold was in terms of even, you know, paying for something like this, you know, what their concerns were with riding. Like, and really, as you even said, a lot of it just comes down to that peace of mind, as well as people that are like, you know what, I won't stop at places because I don't have my lock. And if you're riding from downtown Bentonville, you're riding on bike trails and all that, you're not going to carry a lock. So really, you are kind of missing out on a lot of cities, or in particular, missing out on a lot of revenue opportunities.
Can you tell me more about the upcoming beta test and official launch in August?
Yeah, so we're launching on August 3rd. We're going to do a launch party at the hub. We're going to set up in Bentonville. Yeah, so like I said, we're in production right now of 75 units. We'll have 20 by then, and then we're going to roll the rest out throughout August. So we're about to do kind of an alpha test, so just limited users here in the next week or so. And that's where we'll really test out our app, kind of work out the kinks and the bugs. And then with our beta test, we really want to get, you know, it'll be available publicly. We'll have the app available publicly. We just want to get as many people connecting to it, giving us feedback, you know, understanding it is still beta. We're still working through some of the kinks on the app. But with us being local and able to manage any of the issues personally, that will help a lot. But the big point of it is just, you know, it's a novel idea. So we're kind of having to show people something new and something that they haven't done before. And so we kind of have to retrain a little bit. Like, hey, you know, now you have a lock that you can use, or you don't need to worry about carrying a lock because we're here to, you know, to cover you.
So one thing that occurs to me is that the intellectual property, or IP, here is really important. How do you protect your IP?
Yeah, absolutely. So early on, we knew we wanted to protect this. You know, in all the pitch competitions, it comes up a lot. You know, what's your IP? How are you protecting it? So we immediately submitted for a provisional patent. That was last year. We've since submitted for a non-provisional patent. So our patent is around the mounting bracket system. So we have a unique mounting bracket that retrofits to, you know, existing bike racks, which is a huge part of our value prop. It also includes kind of our notification system and the inner workings of the lock itself. So really, we will be protected, you know, once we're fully patented, we'll be protected from any other new entrants.
Well, and you're protected now to some degree, right? Because you have a patent pending.
Absolutely.
Well, that's great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
The other thing that occurred to me as you were talking, and I'm so glad you have that IP protection. The other thing that occurred to me is, how do you sell this? You know, selling bike locks today is different than what you're going to have to do to sell bike locks.
Yes, it's definitely challenging. And, you know, that's something that Clayton and I have, you know, whiteboarded over and over because it's a novel idea. There's nothing to pattern match against. You know, when I was a buyer at Walmart, it was really easy to understand how you're going to price an item. You find a like item, you undersell, you know, that item, and you have instant demand. Well, anytime that you're dealing with a novel idea, we have to really whiteboard out what are customers willing to pay. And again, it's listening to the customers. And we have a few different customers here. You know, our end goal here is we want people to see LockStop as a utility. So the pipe dream is that we go into a municipality and they subsidize, you know, this service for the riders, because you subsidize the security and you have more people on your bikes. And if you have more people on your bikes, you have less people on your vehicles, and then you have those healthier, greener cities. But we understand, you know, novel ideas are hard to adopt early stage. So Clayton and I, what we've decided is we're going to hold the upfront inventory. So we've invested ourselves in this, you know, in our vision and in our idea to manufacture the first 75 devices so that we can put those out in the community, allow the riders to interact with them. And then we're very confident that those riders, their voice is going to be heard from the community, especially when what we can do is the data that we're able to collect with this device. Now we're able to map out the rider routes. Where are our riders actually riding through a city? And that data is really important to city planning, because city planning, we have ideas about how our riders ride through our communities, but those are ideas. And so now we can take that data and we can overlay it with our current infrastructure or the lack thereof and develop that infrastructure aligned to rider behaviors. So initially we're handling all of the upfront costs with manufacturing and, the monthly payments that are required, to keep these devices connected, to the internet. But what we really see happening is as more riders interact with this device, well, that model flips. Now the cities and the businesses come to us and say, hey, how can we bring LockStop to our communities so that our riders are riding like they do in Bentonville, bike lock free? And so initially, it'll be a service charge. So unfortunately, we'll have to charge the riders up front at first. So it's $1 to activate and 5 cents a minute for less than $4 an hour, you're able to go secure your bike while you're in having a coffee or a beer, or you're going to church or whatever it may be. But yes, eventually we expect to partner with a lot of these municipalities or corporations that want to underwrite the ability for our communities to have this type of experience and this type of security.
Clayton, let me ask you a little bit about competition. This is a great idea. I'd never heard of it till I heard of it from you two. And I liked it right away when I heard it. It's one of the reasons why I invited you on my podcast. This is a great example of how personal experience combined with listening to lots of people helps you identify opportunities in the marketplace. And there's, again, it's another example, too, of how there's no end to innovative ideas, right?
Absolutely.
No one thought about this last year, or 10 years ago, or 20 years ago.
Right.
But it was needed then, too.
Yeah.
So it's pretty neat. But one other idea that came to me is that there may be competition out there already.
Sure.
No.
So, yes, there is competition. And, we first kicked this off when Mike first had this idea. Actually kind of started with him looking at it. He was saying, hey, this doesn't exist. I'm just going to be the person to bring it here from somewhere else. And so there's a company out of San Francisco called BikeKeep. Funny enough, there actually is a rack in Crystal Bridges. But the problem is it's a full infrastructure. It's a big bike rack, and it has this big swing arm that comes down, and it costs about $25,000 for 5 bikes. And there's another company out of New York City called Uni that actually has a crate. It's a big enclosed system. So while it's kind of cool because you can, you get in, it's got like sliding doors, and you walk in, it's probably $500,000. And so you're having to do these big infrastructure changes. And in my job, when I worked in the trails world, in the biking world, I worked with municipalities. And there's one thing I discovered with municipalities, they typically don't have big budgets, and it's very hard to get them to spend it. So trying to come into a city and say, hey, you already have bike racks, but let me just rip those up. You can drop $30,000 to put another one in here. Versus us, where we're saying, at least right now, we're saying, let us just put them here. We don't have to take money at the beginning. We'll get our money from the end customer. We've already talked to the city of Fayetteville, and they were like, absolutely, yeah, just come on. And they just have kind of embraced us with open arms to say, you can turn any bike rack into that. So that's where we really,
that's great.
Yeah, and that's where we really differentiate, from the competition out there, is that we're not trying to, do this big infrastructure change. We're saying we have bike racks. People don't carry their locks. Like, let's bridge the gap here. Let's create something that retrofits to all these different types of racks that are out there. And, easy. It takes less than 5 minutes to install this with the right tools, and you're on your way.
The other place that so when I was dean of the Walton College, a part of my vision was to make students healthier, not just more academically knowledgeable, et cetera, but to really help them be healthy. I'm pretty passionate about that. I was dean for 8 years. I maybe made some progress. I tried, but I would have liked to have done more. And but one challenge we had, we actually had in the Walton College, because we've got access to the Greenway. We have the Fayetteville Traverse, which gives you access to almost all of the living spaces in and around Fayetteville. so you can access it from your bike. We started attracting people to the U of A because of this, and especially in the business school, because as you all know, you come out of the business school building, take a left, go down to the corner, 50 yards from the business school building, there's a world-class mountain biking course right there.
Right.
So, not far from Fable, you've got gravel, you've got mountain biking, you've got road biking, you've got biking on the greenways, you have pump tracks, BMX. We've got everything around here, right? So we started noticing that there were more and more students coming to the business school, not just because it's a great business school, but also because of the biking aspect. And I thought, this is so fascinating. Who could have ever guessed this would happen? Especially I got here 30 years ago.
Right.
I mean, there was nothing. I mean, there was no trails that I knew of. Maybe there were.
Kessler was the only one.
It was Kessler.
Which was illegal. I know.
But now the infrastructure is so much better than it was. But one problem that we still had, because I thought, I want to build out this idea. One problem we had was the safety of the bikes, because bikes get stolen a lot, and it's not just on campus. I mean, one of my kids got their bike. They were living in an apartment not too far from campus, real close to campus, and someone stole their bike. They must have cut the bike lock because it was locked. Right. But this happens so much you wouldn't believe it. I mean, I'm sure you would believe it.
Yes, I do believe it. There's 2 million bikes stolen across the U.S.
Oh, is it that many?
Yeah, effectively every 30 seconds a bike stolen. So I don't know how long we've been recording, but there's been a few bikes stolen just during the time of this podcast.
Well, and we live in one of the safest areas of the country. There's not a lot of crime here.
Right.
I can't imagine. I mean, I've known people that have gone to Wash U in St. Louis, and the problem there is they'll steal the whole car.
Right.
Not just the bike.
Yeah.
But I wonder, I would think so you address the competitor aspect, and so one of your benefits is essentially the barrier to entry is a lot lower for a municipality to get it.
Right.
But I think a campus would be interested in this as well, and many other things are starting to come to mind as I'm talking. But going back to the competition, that leads me to think a little bit about what kind of companies would be interested in buying your company or IP as a result of this.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we've been on the hunt for because, our grand vision is to get this scaled across the country as quickly as we can. And, with our small team right now, we realize that that's impossible. So acquisition, would be great for us. And the fact that now we have the opportunity to scale pretty rapidly. And you have some, big bike lock companies that are out there. You have big security companies that are out there. You think Abus, a really, significant player in the game. You have Kryptonite, another significant player in the game. But then you think outside of just cycling infrastructure or cycling security at all. I mean, you think about Ring doorbells and you think about all these security solutions that are out there. And it's just a natural integration with the devices that they already have in the market. This is effectively an IoT lock. If you look at it that way. And so there are a few different companies out there that we do believe that would, be interested in acquiring us once we have the devices out there that they see, the riders that are interacting with them. And we hope to continue to explore that avenue as we, get down the road a bit further.
How has your partnership as co-founders really contributed? I know I've been involved in the investment community one way or another for a long time. And, I know there's some venture capital firms and even seed funding type companies that they really would prefer co-founders rather than a single founder. Would you mind speaking to that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. Clayton and I talk about this all the time. It's effectively like we live in the same mind at this point. Clayton and I think we've seen each other at least 5 days a week for the last 2 years. And when you spend that much time with any one person, it's almost embarrassing at a point, because I think we're at the stage where we're finishing one another's sentences. And so, I mean, finding a great co-founder for this venture was an absolute necessity. I can't imagine doing it alone. It would have been impossible to do that. Clayton and I both bring our own value to the table. And one thing that we've been able to do is learn to argue effectively. We have very critical candor. He and I may have differences of opinions on things, but then what we do, similar to a marriage, we say, hey, here's my opinion, here's your opinion, but what is best for the business and what's best, for our customer. And so Clayton and I both bring in different perspectives, because I've not been in the cycling industry. I very much am a reflection of the community that I live in. I lived in Hawaii and California for a number of years. So you wouldn't have seen me on a bike. I would have been out in the ocean surfing. So then when I come to this community, and I have this idea after being on the bike, well, Clayton has this very robust, set of experiences that he brings to the table, and a lens that would take me decades to build and be able to look through. So I think having, two people as co-founders on one business is a necessity at the least.
Yeah, I mean, it's critical to our success. Absolutely. Like Mike said, I mean, we talk all the time. I'm pretty sure I talk to him more than I talk to my wife. I don't think she's super happy about that. But she's always like, who's that, Mike? Yeah. But, just being able to work through these ideas, bounce these ideas off each other. I mean, we're constantly, hey, what about this? I mean, Mike is an ideas guy through and through. I mean, obviously brings robust knowledge on the financial side as well, and just his experience in product and Walmart. And
so you had experience in product?
I do, yeah. So I've been very specific in how I've curated my experiences, understanding what we're trying to do with LockStop. So I've really tried to backfill my experience to make sure that we're ready to meet the market. So I spent a couple of years as a buyer for Walmart, where I managed an automotive category that was nearly $500 million. And so I felt pretty confident there that, hey, I understand the business aspect. And so it came, out to LockStop full time, but I realized I was still missing something there. And that was really the product development. And so I worked at Sam's Club for a short time in product management there. And those experiences and the knowledge that I gained were instrumental to making sure that not only do we understand the financials, but now we can understand how to link each one of those financial metrics to a roadmap. So as we're continuing to release to the public, we know which features are going to add the most value, that are the lowest cost, and we can get to the market, sooner rather than later. So building up each one of those experiences to make sure that when we got to this point, August 3rd or August 4th, that we are prepared to do exactly what we're trying to do, which is get this bike lock in as many communities as we possibly can, and make sure that when it gets there, that it's going to add the value that we think it's going to add. And then we have our roadmap of features that are going to continue to add layers of value on top of that. So not only are you having that convenience and security, but now we're going to add some fun factors in there. And then we've also explored opportunities, even with the Boulder law enforcement, about integrating directly, into the law enforcement network, so we can provide real-time, alerts to their law enforcement partners. So if there is a crime in place, well, now we can have direct response, to what's going on in that area.
Currently, you're investing your own money in this, but to scale up, you're going to need additional money. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, you do need, we do need additional capital. Anytime that you have a hardware component, there's a large capital expenditure up front. And, when you're working through the model that we've developed right now, cash flow is obviously a challenge. So in order to get this off the ground as quickly as we would like to, we need to find one of those partners, someone that understands the vision, but not just the vision, but they can sit down and look at the financial opportunities and say, not only are we bringing something that's going to create these healthier, greener communities, but we're also making a solid investment. So right now, as we go into the fall and after we release this, that's exactly what we're looking for. We're looking for those investment partners, preferably, within our community, because this idea started at a Bentonville farmers market And I tell Clayton all the time, I would absolutely hate to leave this community to generate the capital necessary to scale. So that's what we're going to be looking for after August 3rd. Who are those investors that are ready to partner and, help us to scale this vision across the country and then, eventually across the world.
Let's suppose I work for a parks authority for a city, and we're considering this. What's your pitch to me?
I think Bentonville is a great model. We've done a great job here of connecting cycling with the economic impact. And our goal in Bentonville is to get more people on bikes. Well, we know one of the top barriers to riding your bike is theft and having a safe space to lock your bike. We've already discussed many people either forget their lock at home, or they forget the combination, or they forget the key, or lose the key if you're like me. And so what our goal is here is to remove one of those barriers of entry, perhaps the greatest barrier, which is having your bike stolen. How many people do you know that have had a bike stolen and then they go back to the market the next day to buy another bike? It doesn't happen. You have this terrible experience. As you mentioned earlier, you're riding home, you have this really joyful time when you're going from work to home, and then you get there, you lock up your bike, and the next morning it's gone. Well, how are you going to get to work that day? You're going to get in your car, right? And then we do what we practice, which is being in our vehicles. So a lot of folks that have their bike stolen don't ever get that second bike. And though in Bentonville, biking and cycling very much is a leisure activity, there are a lot of places around our country and around the world where this isn't just leisure. This is a means of transportation. This is a way that someone goes from their home to their place of work, and that place of work that's generating the income to take care of their families. And so for us, bike theft is a terrible experience, but for them, it's an impact to their livelihood. So for us, it's removing that barrier of entry to biking, but also keeping those folks that are using this as a mode of transportation. We're keeping the bikes in their possession.
And really the big piece of this too, beyond just being able to secure your bike, because that's what it does really well, is the data. So as, a city official, you will have access to direct rider data. So you'd be able to see where they're going, how long they're staying there. And one thing that's not, out there currently is that direct economic impact of cycling. We've used a lot of different data points for that, but nothing is quite as good as what we're doing. Because if you're parked outside of a restaurant, chances are you're probably eating there. Not to mention, another statistic is that people that ride or walk to coffee shops or bars or restaurants actually spend more time there, which inevitably equates to more money. So when you're driving, you're going to go in, go out, done. But when you're riding, you're going to hang out. There's nothing better than a long ride and then just hanging out and having a beer afterwards. That's why if you go by the hub and, on a Sunday or Saturday, it's packed. So that's really kind of the beauty of all of this. Security is the number one thing, of course, but, what's behind it is even more. Not to mention the opportunity for advertising. If you're Visit Bentonville, for instance, they're always trying to advertise, trying to promote. Well, now they have the opportunity to advertise in other networks. So they can advertise in, Durango and Boulder and all these bike cities around the country. And they know that if they're advertising through us, that's somebody that's on a bike. So you get, you're getting down that, funnel a lot further than they would normally be able to get just with the data that they currently have.
Well, Clayton and Mike, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we absolutely appreciate being here. Thank you.
If you're finding value in this podcast, we greatly appreciate your support by subscribing to our YouTube channel. Additionally, following us on Apple and Spotify and leaving up to a 5-star review would be immensely helpful. We welcome any feedback or questions related to the podcast, as well as suggestions for further topics and guests. You can leave your comments on our YouTube channel, and rest assured that I will read each and every one of them. Please also take a moment to check out our podcast sponsors, as they play a critical role in keeping this podcast running. For more information on specific topics, timestamps, or links to articles mentioned during the podcast, head over to mattwallerpodcast.com.